review. Book one is about the book starter ride for the last 40 years. And today I have my special guest. He's a CEO, founder of Tellwell, over 6,000 book published, and of course, the author of The Call to Ownership. None other than Mr. Tim Lindsay. Welcome, Mr. Team, on Book One Review. And can you please introduce more about yourself, that MS?
Sure. Yeah. Well, I'm the founder and CEO of Tellwell Publishing, and it's funny. I originally managed a campus newspaper for 2 years, and after I was done with that, I really wanted to get a job in publishing, but it was around 2008, 09 when the economy was really bad, and I just couldn't get a job. So I ended up going into self employment. And it's funny that the job I created for myself was called a publishing consultant. But as you may know, or your listeners may know, starting a business and doing self employment is actually quite tough. And it can be
Mm-hmm.
lonely and it's filled with challenges. So I had to go at it and I learned a lot of lessons. But in the end, I failed, I guess you could say. This was over 10 years ago and took a full time job. And funnily enough, the full time job I ended up taking was publishing consultant as a job. And I worked for a company in publishing for several years and then eventually left and then I eventually started my own business and I bootstrapped the business and grew it, but it was essentially a business similar to managing a campus newspaper where we bring together writers with editors and designers and printing and distribution and work as a team to produce a publication. And in my case, it's helping authors self publish, and we can talk about the different ways of self-publishing or how it's different from traditional. But we've done that for over 10 years and worked with over 6,000 authors, and that's the journey I've been on. And so it's been both a journey of authorship, and that's in the Call to Authorship, my most recent book. It's basically sharing a step by step about how to write, publish, and promote a book. And it also digs into why people publish, because we've interviewed our authors extensively and learned about what motivates them. So hopefully, it's a helpful book that empowers people to publish, and that's what it's about.
Yes, and thank you so much for sharing to the world, Mr. Tim. Thank you. So you spent over 25 years in additional and addiction, I should say, and mental health services, leading CCAR and training thousands of peer recovery coaches. With all that experience, why did this particular moment call for a book, and why these 10 stories specifically?
Hmm. Well, actually, I think you got that mixed up with someone else, but it's interesting. We do, in terms of mental health,
Mm-hmm.
we have worked with many authors who have either gone through a journey of struggling with mental health um, or they've gone through some form of difficult, painful journey. And it's actually interesting when you talk about why people write books.
Mm-hmm.
Often it's about the journey of writing a book, and sometimes that journey is partly catharsis. And there's actually some interesting research on what's called expressive writing, which is it's been done by psychologists on people who have like PST, post traumatic stress disorder, and they do exercises where they write expressively for 20 minutes a day for 4 days straight. And they might be writing about, the traumatic experience they had, you know, what it meant, what they went through, what they felt about it then, what they feel about it now. And interestingly, from going through this exercise, it can be a little painful to do that, of course, and it's done under the guidance of a professional. But after people do that, they often find that they actually sample their blood and their immune system is better, and they start to overcome some of their trauma. And it's partly because people go from, their amygdala being on overdrive where they're just having this painful experience, and through this writing exercise, they actually start to kind of position what has happened to them in time. They start to have some agency over, what it means, and they start to sort of see it as one part of their life, and it starts to move from the emotional part of the limbic system, which is on hyperdrive, and it starts to move, sort of be connected with the other parts of the brain, the more rational sides of the brain, and so on. So, interestingly, people often start out writing maybe for catharsis, but often that's not what they end up publishing. Healing can be part of, you can do your healing draft, which is, you're writing just to get stuff out of you, and that can be cathartic. But when it comes to actually publishing something for other people, that's where you actually need to be doing something that's helping other people. And of course, people who've gone through a journey, whether it's mental health or some other journey like building a business, or or immigrating to a new country, they often have lessons to share with others and people who they can help. And so I call that the service why, is sort of helping others. The journey why is more the catharsis side of it. And then the strategic why is the third reason people write books. And sometimes they do all three of those. And that leads to how you can use a book to build a platform, to build your authority, to support things like speaking opportunities or media opportunities, or building out a coaching program based on your knowledge and expertise. So we've had many authors who do that. For example, one author at 10 years old was taken away from his parents in Africa, and he was basically made to join an army. So he was essentially a child soldier, and he was 10 years old, and it was a horrific experience. And it wasn't until, he spent, I think, 7 years as a child soldier, escaped into a refugee camp in Kenya. But of course, 1 year turns to 2 years. He's with hundreds of thousands of people at the refugee camp. Turns to 4 years after finally 7 years as a child soldier, then several years in a refugee camp. He makes his way to Australia, and then he starts to write his book. Eventually, he reconnects with his mom in Africa, who hasn't seen him in over 10 years. But his experience was cathartic at first, but then it's filled with lessons for anyone who's been in a refugee and has to sort of um, assimilate or adapt to a new culture. In his case, Australia. And he turned that into not only a really entertaining and meaningful story that was cathartic for him at first, but he also does public speaking now. He does advocacy and all sorts of interesting work. So his book went from catharsis to valuable lessons for others to actually supporting him as a speaker, to do advocacy and just help raise awareness about what it's like to be a refugee and so on. So there's a bit of a pivot from your question about mental health for, I think, the wrong bio to hopefully an interesting answer.
Thank you for backing me up, Mr. Tim. I must appreciate it. You've guided thousands of authors through Tellwell Publishing, watching them navigate the journey from idea to finished book. After all the observation, what finally compelled you to write your own book, not just for your authors, but also the authors yourself?
Yeah, so it touches on different pieces. One is just removing barriers to publishing. And the funny thing is, on the one hand, publishing is more accessible now, just like podcasting or creating your own YouTube channel is more accessible. And yet, when it comes to writing a book, most people still fail in the very early stages. They want to do a book, but they're not even clear why or whether it's worth it or whether they should. And so my hope is that this book helps them to see themselves and leverages our experience surveying thousands of authors about their motivations, why they book, how they use a book, and plus our experience actually guiding authors step by step through that process. So my hope is that it helps people actually get clarity of their purpose, and then demystify the process and turn it into a simple step by step process of authoring and publishing and promoting a book. And of course, that's what we do as a business, is for people who know that it's a bunch of steps but don't want to do it all themselves. They want guidance, and they're willing to, pay for our services to do that guidance. That's what we do. But the book is also just for people who maybe don't work with us, but they want to do it themselves, or they want to get clear on that plan. But then also, it was a little bit of practice what you preach, right? So I'm using the book not just as, an expressive exercise. It was neat to be writing it. To my little habit was every single day before I had my first sip of my second cup of coffee, I had to have written at least one word in the book. And so to actually go through the process of writing this book, it's, over 200, close to 300 pages, a lot of guidance in it. But of course, I told myself I can't write another book. I wrote a book when I started the business over 10 years ago. And now, I have two kids. I'm running a business. How can I don't have time to write a book. But of course, that's the same excuse everybody else says to themselves. And so what I say now is you don't need time to write a book. You just need time to write one page of a book over and over and over again, right? So I learned that it's more about creating that little habit and the little bit of time and creating the habit there, and that's what I did. But lastly, I've also used the book to now start doing more speaking engagements, doing more media engagements. And even it was just, even though, we have a lot of knowledge from helping 6,000 authors publish, of course, I should know what I'm doing and what I'm talking about. But it wasn't until you actually go through the process of writing a book that you crystallize your framework, you make it simpler, turning it into a 10-step process, turning it into a simple diagram and so on. So that's also leading us to turn some of what we do into coaching programs and things that we can help other people do, and even sharing how we do what we do with other people who might want to partner with us and learn how to help people publish their books as well. So yeah, so I don't know, that's a long-winded answer. Why now is it was 10 years after my last one, so I better practice what we preach and use a book. And I'm using the book to support the business strategically, but it was an awesome process writing it, and I really hope it's helpful to people who most of whom who never get past the planning stage. So that's like a unique thing I do in the book, is create a one-page plan that people do, which gets them really clear on their own vision and their own roadmap for publishing their book.
You introduced the concept of literacy 2.0, the
Mm.
capacity to participate, to share, to help others through words and stories. Was there a specific moment in your life when you crossed from literacy to 1.0 to 2.0, when you realized that consuming was not enough, that you needed to add your voice?
Hmm. Yeah, that's almost like, yeah, you can read and write. That's great. But it's not until you actually find your voice and your purpose in the world that you start to make an impact. And of course, we're all afraid to do that. We all think, oh, I'm just a student, or I don't know enough. And that often comes to business as well. People take jobs, they're employees, but they don't think to start their own business or to do something independently. So I think authorship, writing a book, it's in some ways similar to why people go to school, why they go and do a degree. And in some cases, writing a book can be an alternative to doing a degree, but it's it's like in what's the old movie? Not Alice in Wonderland, The Wizard of Oz. The Wizard of Oz. Dorothy, she goes and goes on her journey with the characters down the yellow brick road, and she meets the wizard at the end. And of course, the wizard, the wizard gives them a diploma, and it's like to have confidence, right? So we often don't feel we're ready to make an impact. And actually, the process of writing a book, it really does prepare you to do media, to do speaking. It's a way of learning and grappling with ideas. And of course, you don't really learn something until you teach it. And that's what you do with a book. You're synthesizing your ideas. You're in many cases you're also learning a lot while you write a book. And that's even if you're writing about your own experience. You're actually figuring out what your experience means in a way that can be shared. So I think writing and publishing and promoting a book, is an exploration. Often half of what you write about, you actually learn in the process. Maybe you do your outline and you're like, I know this, I know this, I know this, but I don't know that and that. So instead of writing what you know, you actually have to do some research as you go and fill in your knowledge gaps. So you learn a lot and you struggle with how to present it in a simple way and in a way with humanity and a way with your voice. And through that, you gain expertise, you gain empowerment, and you gain some confidence that can help you make an impact in the world. And that's what you actually need to do, right? We can read and write, but what if we're too afraid to say anything, too afraid to have an opinion, or too afraid to try starting a business and fail a few times and try again and learn? So I think learning to embrace the power of authorship is empowering, and more people should do it, and they'll learn a lot through the process.
Very well said, Mr. Team. The book launch of the Empowered Author Summit alongside with 20 speakers and 800 aspiring and published authors. What is it like to release your book into a room full of people who either done what you're teaching or desperately want to? Did that feel like pressure or like coming home?
Well, I did, in a sense, feel so. We organized this Empowered Author Summit, and it was awesome to bring together a whole bunch of other speakers about authorship and publishing and writing, and then to have so many people join us to listen to the presenters. And some people were like there all 3 days straight. It was a marathon, but for myself, it it was when I released the book into the world. I say with a book launch though, it's like ideally you have a lot of time to really prepare a good one and build your audience in advance of the release. And but in my case, I'm looking at all of 2026 as sort of my launch year, and I'm kind of going slow and steady. But on the one hand, I felt uh, ready, so I did several little talks during the Empowered Author Summit, and because I had just written the book, it was sort of like which pieces of the book, and then it's a new skill, right? Because you can write something, but then how do you speak it? How do you present it in a way that's entertaining and engaging for people? So that's something I'm still learning and struggling with, and that's awesome. But on the other hand, I wasn't ready because maybe for many authors, you're never quite done your book, of course. If you struggle with perfectionism or just, um, you know, nervousness about whether it's good enough yet and always knowing it can be better, I was struggling with that. For me, I got the first draft done in a relatively on time, on schedule process. I think it was less than 6 months to write the first draft, but it was actually the process from going from a first draft to the finished draft and to getting it published that took longer than I expected. So having an event in the date where I was scheduled as a speaker and where I had actually workshops then the next week with hard copies of the book to teach what I had written about in the book, that forced me to actually just hit publish. And so it forced me to do what I really, really didn't want to do, which was say, okay, it's good enough to publish and do it. And I've done one little round of revisions since then just to clean up a few little pieces. And of course, I went through multiple rounds of editing, but of course, I'm making revisions and maybe introducing new errors. And so it's a rigorous process you have to do to make even a quote unquote self published book, but one that has been professionally edited multiple times, professionally designed, and that you're actively promoting. So, yeah, doing the Empowered Author Summit was awesome. Just bringing together other people in publishing and writing and kind of joining with them to speak to a similar audience that we all love engaging with, which is authors trying to do something with their voice.
You say a book is more than a product to earn royalties. It's a way of being of service, a process, or a process of becoming, or and for someone powerful business tool. Which of those three is the most true for you with this book and why?
Hmm. Yeah, it's funny. I think because I call those give, build, and become. the service why, the strategic why, and the journey why. So the journey why is where you're like intrinsically motivated, right? You're doing it for expression, you're doing it to for the joy of it, you're doing it because it's a better thing to do than wasting your time on social media and getting angry and reading the news. So that's the journey why. But then the next two, the strategic why, using a book as a business building tool, and the service why, which is creating something that's valuable to a targeted reader, those two really go hand in hand, right? You can't r- build a business without offering a service that actually helps people and that they want and need, and after you deliver it they give you good reviews and so on. So it's a bit of both though, and I was really exploring both the service piece, which is, you know, demystifying self-publishing, explaining it, synthesizing 10 years of experience and 6,000 authors into a simple book and a simple step-by-step method to share. That's a huge part. But then the business piece, kind of just have to create something that's of service in order to build anything. So, but I wanted to test out lots of the business building aspects. So, using it for speaking, using it for media, using it uh, for as a lead generation tool. Um, those are definitely, I say it's sort of half and half. So I often say it's not, you're not all one or the other. I initially was like, yes, I'm going to do a book that's going to help promote our business. That's totally on the strategic why. But to do that well, you know, you have to do something that is really of value to someone. You have to create something that's genuinely going to help people. And then I've also just been loving the process. Loving the process of struggling to write, struggling to get over all the mindset barriers, and then, you know, struggling to learn new skills like how to create signature talks or how to do an inspirational talk based on something like a book. So I'm enjoying the journey as well. Oh, I think you're actually on mute, Daniel.
Thank you. So, Mr. Tim, to wrap up our discussion for today, if someone read your book, follows every step, and still never publish, still stuck in fear or perfectionism or busyness, what they want them to know about themselves anyway?
Well, that's a good question. You don't have to publish a book. You certainly don't. And when people get to the very end, when they have their first book, they're often faced with that same question, which is, should I keep promoting the book, or
Mhm.
that's one option. You know, because you can learn a lot promoting a book. If you're stuck, if you're failing, if you hit a road, well, you can learn new pieces of it. But no, at the end of the day, I think people are searching for meaning, and writing a book can be part of that. People are searching for well-being as well. Writing a book can be a worthwhile endeavor, but it's not the only thing to do. If it's causing you more stress than it's worth, you know, put it aside. Don't do it, and focus on other areas of life like relationships and your health and your getting a good night's sleep.
Beautifully articulated, Mr. Tim. So, can you please invite our listeners to, wow, to support the call to authorship? The call
Yeah,
of authorship.
yeah, absolutely. And we're actually right now we're doing a beta course, which is guides people through part one of the book, which is creating a one-page call to authorship plan. And you can learn more about that on my author website, calltoauthorship.com. And then our self-publishing website is tellwellpublishing.com. But I'd be happy to connect with anyone who's struggling with how to write a book and creating a plan to do so.
Certainly, yes, people support Mr. Team, because if you support him for sure, more and more empowering authors will rise. So, Mr. Team, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for having me, Daniel. Have a great day.
Marty, come people, see you soon.